So the topic for this session is absolute sex. If you look at peace message number 10, absolute sex comes out, but it's translated wrong in English. According to the peace message, it says absolute sexual morality, absolute sexual ethics. But True Father never mentioned those words. From the beginning, True Father said this in English, absolute sex. And then he translated this into Korean. And then the Korean word was retranslated into English. And they translated it as absolute sexual morality and ethics. It's totally different. Absolute sex is not morality or ethics. It's talking about the action, sexual activity, the action. It's the act of love using the sexual organs. So we'll start here. So, Foundation Day, there will be God's marriage. God's wedding is when God embodies Adam's body and Eve's body. So true father and true mother's bodies, and God marries, embodying true mother and true father's bodies. So this is true parents' third wedding at the perfection level, and the perfection stage. So true God is inside true parents' bodies. This is again the perfection level of perfection stage, and we'll go into detail about this on Thursday. So after wedding, what happens? So they make love. So Adam and Eve, if they had not fallen, they would grow up to the perfection level, perfection stage. And Adam and Eve both are individual selves of God, and then they marry. And Adam and Eve's wedding would have been God's wedding. The first night Adam and Eve make love, this would have been God's love. And this is what absolute sex is. Then so what do we want to do with absolute sex? God, Adam and Eve become one. So Adam and Eve become one body when they make love, and God comes down vertically and three of them become one. This is the substantial Trinity. This is absolute sex. And this is why the purpose of creation. So when Adam and Eve first make love, God comes down vertically, and the position, and as a result of that, three of them becoming one, the children that are born are at the children of Adam and Eve, and at the same time God's children. So from the beginning, the children of Adam and Eve would have been God's direct children. There were no such children yet. We are not those kind of children yet either. Why? Because God did not have His wedding. So on Foundation Day, when God has His wedding, the three of them will become one when they make love. And as a result of that, the children that's born after that would marry after 20 years. But because we all received the blessing already, and all the true children received blessing already, through the blessing, so after God's wedding on Foundation Day, two parents will turn around and give us a blessing again. And this blessing, benediction, is when, this is our wedding when that God will give us. But because we already received the blessing already, so we will be reborn as God's direct children. And at the same time, so it will be only a little time off from two parents and God's wedding. So how can God and two parents become one? The core thought is absolute sex. So the act of fall was free sex. So when Jesus came 2,000 years ago, and God also sent true Father, was to complete the purpose of creation, which is absolute sex. And that's on Foundation Day. So what is absolute sex? In the Unification Church, it's the greatest truth that among all the truths that has been taught by true parents. It's the core value of all the 8 great textbook teaching materials. If you can summarize in one word, that would be absolute sex. And they translate this as absolute sexual morality and ethics. So how can they do this? This has nothing to do with true Father. So we have to understand this clearly. And we can attend God directly, although we will be spiritually, and live together. So the word absolute sex God wanted to achieve the purpose of creation through this. But this word, Satan knew about this word. And long time ago, Satan already used this word. So the free sexualists were using this word already, but with an entirely different meaning. So 1996, before True Father used this word, so if you typed absolute sex on the website, then you would get all porn stuff. So who is True Father? From 1992, True Father's biggest mission was new creation in place of God. So true parents, when they make a new creation for God, what was the first thing He would recreate? It was new terminology. So the words that God loved the most, Satan took those words and gave it the worst meaning. So one of these words was also peace. So peace is when the ideal world is completed. But Satan used this word in Russia, in North Korea, and used this word peace as the worst, with the worst meaning. So True Father had to restore these words, to restore its original meaning as God meant it. And only when true parents use these words, the true meaning can be restored. So in 1996, the word absolute sex was one of those words. When True Father first proclaimed absolute sex, the free sexualists in America were very excited that Reverend Moon finally revealed his true identity, now that he's on our side. Just from hearing that word. But once they read the actual words, the explanation, they said they were deceived. So this word was used most in May at the Second World Assembly for the Youth Federation for World Peace. And for 2 months afterwards, True Father spoke with the theme of "Let's become the protectors of absolute sex." So in 1996, August, at the inauguration for FFWPU, Father spoke without manuscript for about 30-40 minutes on top of the speech, and he proclaimed absolute sex in front of everyone. He spoke in English. The True Father spoke in English, not Korean, and he proclaimed in English, and the terminology he used was absolute sex. August 1st, 1996. So what is the way the FFWPU should go? So from the age of HSA, UWC, why did True Father establish the FFWPU? Why was the Family Federation created? If you summarize the purpose in one word, it's absolute sex. It's to restore the word. So what is the way that the Family Federation should go? True Father spoke in English, number one. So before that, after Adam and Eve fell, Satan had dominion over the world. And the one weapon that Satan used, the one armament he used was the sexual organ. With sexual organ, Satan was able to have dominion over the world. So why did True Father create that Family Federation? How can we liberate the sexual organ? That was number one. Second, how can we make... And third, how can we protect that sexual organ? It was these three things. For these three things, True Father inaugurated the Family Federation. That's the only purpose. So the funny thing is, there was the speech, the published speech manuscript, but none of these contents included in there. Why? Because True Father spoke in English. So the first person who transcribed Father's speech did not speak English. So I apologize. This was excluded. So True Father spoke in English. So when True Father speaks in English in two occasions. One, when the translation is terrible. Second, because True Father cannot wait for... When the force of the word is so great that he can't wait for the translation. That's why he spoke in English. So what's the conclusion? So what's the conclusion? God directly moves absolute sex by becoming one directly with Adam and Eve. He comes to the blessed family and becomes one. And through this, we can also become God's temple. There's no other way. So this is the concept of absolute sex. So again, it's in English, absolute sex, not in Korean. So what is going from free sex to absolute sex? Absolute sex is the starting point of ideal family. It's also the starting point of ideal kingdom. So what is the ideal kingdom? So while I was at UTS, one professor said, True Father is crazy. So he said kingdom itself is ideal. So what is ideal kingdom?
Ideal kingdom means both. Ideal kingdom includes both kingdom of heaven in heaven and on earth.
So it's a new word that True Father created. This is also through absolute sex. And only through absolute sex can the origin division union actually be completed. Origin refers to Heavenly Father. Division is Adam and Eve. And once they perfect themselves, they marry and they become one. And at this position, Heavenly Father comes down vertically. And that's the union. How does this happen? It's through God's wedding and absolute sex. Only these two things. So absolute sex. So you hear it says 7 deaths and resurrections. So when True Father was proclaiming this, True Father had went to prison 6 times. And the purpose of going to prison 6 times was to be able to proclaim this one word, absolute sex. If you read this speech, this is what Father says. So True Father's purpose of his life course until 1996, the purpose of Providence until then, was to proclaim this one word, to restore absolute sex and proclaim it in front of humanity. So what was Satan's purpose then? It was to prevent from this word being proclaimed. So what is the concept of absolute sex and attributes of sexual organ? So what is free sex? So you can think of absolute sex as the opposite of free sex. Free sex refers to freedom in the act of love. And no matter, it's free, your partner, and you can do it with women, men, and men together. So all these ideas together, it's the act of love of Satan. So if you summarize Satan's concept in one word, it's self-centeredness. So True Father uses this word, absolute sex, to mean absolute and sex. What does absolute mean? It means absolute, unique, unchanging, eternal. All the meanings of these words are included in the word absolute. These are the internal 4 attributes of God. Absolute, unique, unchanging, and eternal. And what is sex? It's a sexual act by man and woman. So what is absolute sex? It's a sexual act by man and woman, absolute, unique, unchanging, and eternal. And centering on God. If God does not come to meet, then that is not absolute sex. So what are the attributes? September 5th, 1999, God is love. In other words, love is God. God's 4 internal attributes are absolute, unique, unchanging, eternal. The attributes of love is also absolute, unique, unchanging, eternal. And as I mentioned, sexual organ, how can we make absolute, unique, unchanging, eternal sexual organ? So the attributes of sexual organ is also absolute, unique, unchanging, and eternal. So in conclusion, if you look at it centering on attributes, God is love, and God is sexual organ. Centering on attributes. So centering on attributes, God is sexual organ. So when God comes down to human beings, where does he come to? He comes to sexual organ. The root of humanity is sexual organ. This is how Father explains it in his words. If you want to study in depth, you can come to Sunmun University. So sexual organ is the root of ideal family and ideal kingdom. I mentioned this briefly, but God is the divine entity of love, life, lineage, and conscience. And sexual organ is also the organ of love, life, lineage, and conscience, as well as the original palace. And the sexual organ also holds the God's secret and the secret of creation and the secret of history. So unless you resolve the issue of the sexual organ, you cannot understand the history of humanity, and you cannot know about God. And you can't understand creation, fall, and restoration. So True Father emphasizes. So what are the special characteristics of sexual organ? It is the borderline between good and evil. borderline between heaven and hell, between God and Satan.
선한 사람과 악한 사람의 심판의 기준 경계선
And it's the standard of judgment between good person and evil person. It's the borderline between death and resurrection. So all borderlines has a conclusion as the sexual organ. So God, it's a word that God loves the most, but Satan took it and gave it the worst meaning possible. So when you curse, the true Father uses all these curse words related to this, and it's because only by using those words you can restore the meaning. So the conclusion is simple. What Satan likes the most, God hates. What God likes the most, Satan hates. So what about us? Do we dislike what the world likes, the secular world likes, and vice versa? So the sexual organ is the most important organ in the human body. When God was creating human beings, when God was creating Adam, it took over 3 billion years, and the organ that he put in the most effort and time in was the sexual organ. And within myself, so somebody asked a question during break time, what is the difference between divine mind and spirit mind? So divine mind is connected to God. Spirit mind is not connected to God. So the divine mind, which is connected to God, in order to achieve it, you have to be connected to God by the blood lineage, which is through the sexual organ. So you have, so there's no fall in this. So if you look here, spirit world and physical world. So where do you meet? It's the sexual organ. You may have a lot of questions, but so the place where spirit and physical body becomes one is also the sexual organ. The sexual organ is not an object of punishment, because to emphasize, only through the sexual organ, God and human can, it's a shortcut of God and human to become one. And because of this reason, no matter what kind of crime that a human commits, the sexual organ cannot be punished. Because if you do not have a sexual organ, there's no way to meet God. So true Father says this in order to emphasize. So the sexual organ is the origin of the universe. True Father says before God created human beings, God created the nature, all creation first. And it's based on the twin system. So couples. So what is the reason for the twin system? The sexual organ makes man a man and makes a woman a woman. And this is the only thing that distinguishes between man and woman. And this is, the sexual organ is what makes man and woman one. Then how about God? God also, only through this. But because God already existed as one from the beginning. So owner of sexual organ and absolute sex, it's simple. In the fallen world, free sex is pervasive because of the wrong understanding of the owner of sexual organ. Because it's attached to my body, they think you're free to use it as you want, with whoever you want, and whenever you want. And where does this concept come from? It comes from Satan, Lucifer. And True Father, when he proclaimed absolute sex, he said that he proclaimed that the owner of the sexual organ is switched. So there's two kinds of owners. So there's a vertical owner and a horizontal owner of the sexual organ. The vertical owner is God. The horizontal owner, who is it? It's your spouse. So before you marry, the owner of your sexual organ is God. And you should live in vertical relationship with God. So from this viewpoint, we have to understand clearly the concept of the owner of sexual organ. And by achieving only this, the disorder in the world can be cleared. So how should you use the sexual organ? The concept of the owner of sexual organ and what is the principle of its use. Most importantly, you have to become one with the vertical owner. The vertical owner of the sexual organ, becoming one with the owner, it's the first blessing. So what do you achieve individual perfection with? So when is the first blessing completed? It is when you keep your sexual purity until God marries you. That's the license of individual perfection. Isn't this right? It's simple. So from human beings' viewpoint, individual perfection, first blessing, mind-body unity, the owner of mind is God. So God comes down to us, and that's divine mind, mind-body unity. And in that state, if you meet your horizontal owner of your sexual organ, that's the marriage. So become one with the vertical owner and meet the horizontal owner and have the marriage blessing. And second, with the permission from the owner of sexual organ. So True Father says, if you can use the sexual organ if the owner desires it, but because the ownership is switched, just because one side wants it, the love can't be achieved. It's only when both parties agree. So when it says with permission, it's referring to permission from both individuals. And most importantly, it's only for the owner of sexual organ. The sexual organ attached to your bodies, you can't use it for yourself, but you're supposed to use it for the vertical owner, God, and the horizontal owner, the only one spouse you have. So this is the origin of true love. True love and absolute sex. So what is the origin of true love? The origin comes from the concept of owner of sexual organ. So vertical owner, God, and horizontal owner, your spouse. When you use it for your vertical and horizontal owners, and when you invest and forget, this is true love. And when do you experience this true love? It's when you make your first love after marriage. It's through absolute sex. This is very important. This concept is very important. This is the core of True Father's teaching.
생식기의 주인과
So the owner of sexual organ and how to understand the fall.
타락은 어떻게 이루어졌습니까?
How did the fall happen? So Archangel and Eve, and then Eve and Adam.
이 개념보다는
So the conclusion is simple.
종적인 생식기의 주인인 하나님과
Adam and Eve did not become one with the vertical owner of their sexual organ, God, and they used the sexual organ without the permission of the owner, and they used it not for the owner.
자기가 중심이 됐습니다.
So in conclusion, they were centered on the self. So Archangel was acting centered on himself. Same for Eve. Eve acted without any relationship with God, to God and Adam. So the important thing is, if you look at from the viewpoint from the sexual organ, it's thinking that you're the center without any relation to the vertical owner God and your horizontal owner. And that is, you can understand the fall in that way. So who is the identity who gave this thought, the first being? It was the Archangel. This concept of disregarding the owner of sexual organ.
그러면 생식기 주인과 따먹지 말라는 계명.
So owner of sexual organ, the commandment, do not eat.
생명나무는 99년 10월 3일 날 거기 표기합니다.
So October 3rd, 1999 is very clear. So we have top divine principle lecture here.
성경을 설명하는데
So
아버님 그 옛날
So divine principle, they try to explain the tree of life, tree of knowledge of good and evil through the Bible, but it's actually very simple. Tree of life is Adam's sexual organ, tree of knowledge of good and evil is Eve's sexual organ, snake is Archangel's sexual organ. And this is how the fall came about. What is the fall? It's thinking that you are the owner of your own sexual organ.
그러니까 하나님 뜻과 관계없이
So without any connection to God, when you want, with whoever you want, and whenever you want, exercising love is the fall.
종적인 주인, 획적인 주인 하나도 없이
So without permission from the vertical owner and horizontal owner before marriage,
우리 집 어부로서
who was the origin of the fall? Adam, Eve, Archangel, Lucifer? It was Archangel Lucifer.
이게 나오니까 recognition for self
So recognition for self and recognition for others. 2002, March 3rd, that's the title of the speech. Recognition for self and recognition for others. These are two very important terms. Very important. If you do not know the meaning of these words, it's pretty much impossible to understand Foundation Day. This is how important these words are.
근데 자체의 자각은
So recognition for self
자기 중심한 자각이
is recognition centered on your own self.
하나님과 관계에서도 내가
So even in relationship with God, you think you are the center. In any relationship, recognition for self is saying that you are the center of that relationship. So recognition for others is saying that in relationship with God and yourself, God is first. Relationship between
근데 이 자체 자각
any relationship you have, saying that the other person is first.
천사자각 무시해 자체 자각의
So recognition for self, the substantial being of that is Satan. Substantial being for recognition for others is God.
그다음에 타체 자각
So recognition for others is an absolute recognition centered on God. Recognition for others is no self-recognition.
아주 중요한 개념이다 이 단어.
So these are very important concepts. You should remember these words.
마지막 시간에 자세히
We'll study this in more detail later today's session.
그러면 뭐냐 이제는 타락을 통해서 잃어버린 것들이
So what were the things that were lost due to the fall. This content is also in the peace message. God's blood lineage was lost. So when Adam and Eve fell, God lost his lineage, the realm of lineage. When Cain killed Abel, God's peace was lost. And as a result of that, God's property, realm of ownership was lost. So hell on earth and hell in heaven came about. So why is it hell on earth and hell in heaven? Because of recognition for self. Whose recognition for self? It was Satan's recognition for himself that brought hell on earth and hell in heaven. So we have to know more clearly the identity of Satan, the archangel. So liberation of human beings. It begins from the liberation of sexual organ, as I mentioned before. So I mentioned all these before. So until now, the one weapon, armament that Satan used was the sexual organ. So how can we liberate the sexual organ from Satan? How can we create the absolute, unique, unchanging, eternal sexual organ? And how can we protect the liberated sexual organ? This is the way that the Family Federation should go, and this are the things that the Messiah has to do, the most important mission for the Messiah. So this content is not found in the EDP. So what is the meaning of absolute sex? 4 things. So remember just these 4 things. So as I mentioned before, it's the action. It's not morality or ethics. It's the actual action. So first, when can you make love? It's after blessing. With who? It's only between husband and wife, one man and one woman. And it's while attending God at the center. The method is free. It's simple.
Act of blessing with your spouses, attending Heavenly Father's parents, and free. 아까도 아침 먹을 때 말씀을 나눴었는데.
So I talked about this over breakfast, but in our church, when the elder members were teaching the younger members, they said there were times when they educated, don't make love so much, only when you want to make children. But according to True Father's words, what's the difference between animals and human beings? Animals, they can make love only when they want to reproduce. Human beings can make love without the prerequisite of multiplication. And this is why human beings are different from animals. This is the core of True Father's teaching. So during the 80s, there was a black 형제님. Probably some of the elder members know. So when he came like briefly and went. So when he came, he said he limited the way to make love between husband and wife very specifically. And then in 1996, True Father got rid of all those. He proclaimed absolute sex, and as long as you keep these 3 principles, the way is free. Then why is it so? Because blessed families, after their blessing with their liberated, in order to protect their liberated sexual organ, is to experience the greatest joy when they are making love. And that's why the method is free. So the husband for the wife and the wife for the husband, they should think, how can I make my spouse happy? They should research and use various ways to use their sexual organ for the sake of your spouse. And you can research all the methods at the animal and used in the animal world and apply it. So if you look at Father's words, he mentions how snakes make love, tigers, rabbits. So he talks about all these different animals and how they make love, and there's a lot of content that he teaches this. Why is this? Because through researching and applying all these different methods, there's no time or space to think about someone else. So blessed families should live better than anyone else. So these 4 things, after blessing with your spouse, attending, true parents of heaven, earth, and humankind, and artistically. So what is like thunder and lightning? Thunder and lightning, Father says, is the marriage in nature. So you should experience love like that 4 times a year, at least. So I'll give you one example. So there's Japanese wives in Korea. So when I said this during a lecture, I got a call about a month later. This Japanese wife, she was working at a company, non-church company, and 600. So there was a mistake. So she had to, it would have cost her $600,000 on her side. But she remembered what she heard during lecture, and so she went back home and had this love, and then when she went back to the office tomorrow, it was restored to the computer. So true Father is a successful person. So why? It's because Father knows God the best. And because true Father only speaks words that makes God happy. And because God is happy, He helps true Father. And that's why true Father succeeds. So do you want to succeed? Then think about how you can make God happy, and then God will help you. So there's many ways that God feels how you can make God happy, but the best way to make God happy is what I said before. So 4 times a year, then you can live the rest of the year with that feeling. So first, it's to love after blessing marriage. So before your blessing, you should maintain your sexual purity. Absolutely, you must keep it. So what is the standard for the sexual purity? It's bachelorhead and maidenhead. So before a woman marries, she has to protect her maidenhead, and and how her maidenhead breaks the first time she makes love. The same thing for men as well. So 2002, October 10th, True Father said, all blessed children should not have circumcision. So True Father proclaimed this, October 10th, 2010. So after blessing you can. So this is the standard for sexual purity. So when we say purity, especially in the East, it's emphasized only for the women. But this is not only for the women, but same for men and women. So this is not a sexist concept, it's equality between men and women. So equality between men and women comes from sexual purity. That's where it starts, according to True Father's teachings. So purity is not a choice. It's a choice, but without the right to choose. So you can't choose it with free will, but it's already been decided by God, but you have to choose to keep it and keep it. So what is freedom? Freedom is the right to choose. So there's two kinds of choices. One is choice with the right to choose. Second is choice without right to choose. So you can make choices among anything you want, but there's one thing you cannot. You don't have the freedom to choose. It's sexual purity. This is not a choice for the human beings. The moment you make a choice, you're saying goodbye to God. So you have to educate the blessed children. So from God's position, so God's purpose of creation is again, God embodies Adam's body. That's the first blessing. Then Adam becomes the substantial manifestation of God. Second, receives and marries Eve. What's the purpose of marriage? To make love. Who is Eve? Eve is Adam's wife and at the same time God's wife. And that's why it's God's wedding as well. And when Adam and Eve make love, that's God's love as well. And then they can multiply God's direct children. This is the completion of the family. And when you expand the family, that's ideal kingdom. So the three great blessings in the EDP, it explains it with reference to the portion of responsibility. But here we have God as the center and subject and explains it. So through all this process, God can feel joy directly. This is the purpose of creation. So God embodies Adam's body. So this is when incorporeal God becomes corporeal God. So last December, True Father said, all humanity in the world, on this earth, what's the difference between them and True Father? The subject is different. So True Father is managed by God of Night. All the rest of human beings are managed by God of Day. So God manages Adam, and once Adam perfects himself, he can manage the rest of humanity. And that Adam is always inside God. So vertical God becomes horizontal God. God of Night becomes God of Day. And why is this? It's in order to bequeath God's true love. So I'll explain this in more detail later. So from human's position, this is a period of becoming God's divine representative. So keeping sexual purity from God's viewpoint is embodying Adam's body. From human's positions, becoming God's divine representative. So what is a representative? So here it says a representative. So representative is someone who represents another being personally. It's God's image, second God, divine representative. So how do you become God's divine representative? It's through keeping your sexual purity until your marriage, and it's to have control over your sexual organ. So one of the biggest motto in True Father's life was to complete self-discipline before wanting control over the universe. The greatest self-control is the control over your sexual organ. So True Father, when he was 21 years old, he left Korea to go to Japan to study. There's two determinations he made. One was During my studies in Japan, I will never, ever, absolutely never fall. So he made this determination before he left for Japan, and he kept this.
가장 위대한 장관이자
So the greatest self-discipline is control of sexual organ.
생식기 주관이 뭐냐?
So what is the control of sexual organ? It's absolute faith, absolute love, and absolute obedience. Father says it's possible through these three things. We'll study this later in detail.
결국 우리가 몸과
So control of sexual organ is unification of mind and body. Only through control of sexual organ can you achieve mind and body unity.
하나님과 인간이 하나 될 수 있어요.
And through that control, you can achieve unification of God and human.
통해서 영계와 지상 하나 될 수 있고요.
And also the unification of the spirit world and the physical world.
그래서만
And through control of sexual organ, think of this as just emphasis.
첫 번째 단계가
So this is the first step toward completing the first blessing.
결국은
So this is the core. So the core step is keeping your sexual purity.
잘 줄여야 돼요.
So you have to control your sexual organ.
두 번째는 뭡니까? 이제는 이렇게 잘 지키고 축복을 받았어요.
Second, so you kept your sexual purity and you received the blessing. Then you can only love between husband and wife.
저는 타락을 풀어야 돼요.
So there's two things that true father does.
잘못된 과거를
One is to erase all
두 번째는 뭡니까?
the past since the fall. Second is to
새로 창조해서
create newly one man and one woman. One man and woman in the physical world and one man and one woman in the spirit world, and to marry them.
축복결의 의미가 뭡니까?
So what is the meaning of the blessing marriage?
결혼은 참 부모님의 주례로 하는 결혼 의식이고요.
It's the marriage ceremony under true parents officiating.
참 부모님 여기 가시면
So when true parents go to the spirit world, President Hyung Jin-moon will probably do it.
그러면 이것이 뭡니까? 축복 결혼은 가장 성스러운 의식인데 유출인데 뭐냐?
So the blessing marriage is the most sacred ritual to meet the owner of your sexual organ.
두 사람입니까?
Is the owner one person or two people? Two persons.
바꿀 수 있습니까? 없습니까?
Can the owner be switched, changed?
가능한 물론요. 축복받은 2세, 3세 자녀들에게 이런 교육해야 돼요.
So regardless of anything else, you have to teach this to your second and third generations.
그다음에 우리가 여기서 생식기 주인의 허락을 받고 생식기를
So it's
있는
also the ritual of receiving permission to use the sexual organ.
그다음에 사랑을 통해서
And when you use it, it's only for the owner.
완성할 수 있어요.
And through this, you can become a complete person. You can perfect yourself.
여자도 안주발인데 앱서를
Men and women by themselves are only half person. And through the marriage blessing,
하나 돼서
men and women can become one and become a complete person and then take after God.
그러면 축복의 의미는 뭡니까?
What
폴리게미,
is the principle of the blessing marriage? Polygamy is not allowed.
호모섹슈얼 매니지
Homosexual marriage is not allowed.
축복 결혼은 데스티니지
Blessing marriage is destiny, not fate.
페이트는
So fate
지상에서의 관계로 끝나는 것은
ends.
그러나 데스티니는
So fate is like relationship on earth, and destiny continues. The relationship continues in the spirit world.
세상에서 결혼한 사람들은
So for people who marry in the secular world, they cannot live together once they go to the spirit world.
이것이 세상에서 결혼과 축복 결혼의 차이점.
And this is the difference between secular marriage and blessing marriage.
한 남자 한 여자.
So one man and one woman.
그러니까 사랑의 관계는 오직 한 남자와 한 여자 말씀을 드렸습니다.
So relationship of love is permitted only between husband and wife, one man and one woman, and only for the owner.
사랑하면서 다른 여자 생각 안 하게
So those who achieve mind and body unity when they're making love, they would not think of another woman or a man, they would concentrate.
그러니까 이거 뭐 이거 다 나오죠.
So they just explain it more.
이것도 그렇죠.
Same thing here. These are not allowed.
세상에서는
In the world,
우리에게 허락되지 않는 것.
what is allowed in the world is not allowed for us.
세 번째는 뭡니까?
Third,
하나님을 모시는 동안
it's to love while attending God.
버티칼 섹슈얼 오너가 얘기 아시기 때문에
So the vertical owner is God. That is why. So this is speaking artistically.
생식기의 주인만을 위해서 사랑하는
So you should only use the sexual organ for the owner. And the vertical owner is God.
배우자이기 때문에
And the horizontal owner is your spouse.
하나님을 모시고 사랑할 때
And that is why you should attend God. And that is how you can make God happy. And
목적을
God can experience the purpose of creation through the husband and wife.
모시고 하나님은 기뻐서 같이
So when husband and wife make love, if they make such love that brings God to them, they don't need to pray separately for help from God. God will be happy and God will help them.
결론은 하나님과 배우자를
So in conclusion,
사랑의 행위를 할 수 있다.
the act of love is only permitted for God and spouse.
5월 3일 날
1998, May 3rd,
제목이 오리진 디비전
the title of the speech was One Mind, One Body, Oneness, and Origin, Division, Union, Action.
오리진이 뭐냐?
So what is the origin? The origin is one mind. Division
아담 노아가 결혼해서 하나
is when completed Adam marries and becomes one body.
그 자리에
And in that position, God comes down vertically, and the three of them becoming one is the union.
무엇을 통해서
Through what?
미디어 액션이 이해됩니다.
So how can you understand origin, division, union, action? It's through absolute sex.
앱스를 섹스를 통해서
And through absolute sex, you can achieve perfection. And as a result of that, you can have sons and daughters and complete the four-position foundation. And from 1998, May 3rd,
오리진 디비전 액션이
the origin, division, union, action was True Father's key point in his words. He talked about this a lot.
이것만 오리진 디비전 union 액션만 완성되면 삶이
So once origin, division, union, action is completed, the completion of four-position foundation happens automatically and naturally. It's a natural result.
왜 그렇습니까?
Why is this?
아담 하와가 완성하면요.
If Adam and Eve perfect themselves,
아담 완성을 안 하면
so perfected Adam and Eve,
나가지고
when they have children, sons and daughters, they raise them directly.
여기까지 얘기할게요.
So I'll end here on this point.
창조 목적은 절대성을 통해서 완성됩니다.
The purpose of creation is completed through absolute sex.
완성을 아담의 결혼식은
So again, the marriage ceremony of perfected Adam is the marriage ceremony of God.
아담의 부인이자 하나님의 부인.
Eve is Adam's wife,
아담
and at the same time, the wife of God. And Adam's love is God's love.
사랑하는 그 자리에
And when Adam and Eve first make love, God comes to that position. And even before Adam and Eve, God experiences joy through that love.
그 한순간에
And for that one moment, God created. And that day is the foundation day.
그 절대성은 다시 말씀드리면
So absolute sex is
완성입니다.
the perfection of origin, division, union, action.
근데 이것은 정금학자에서 오리진이
In the origin, division, union, action, the origin
하나님이죠.
is God. So God, dual characteristics, absolute, unique, unchanging, eternal establishment of silent sex, harmony and unification. Why is it silent sex?
하나님은 처음부터
Because God from the beginning was one.
하나님은 처음부터 앱솔 섹스를 통해서
Because God
하모니
from the beginning achieved harmony and unification through absolute sex.
하나님은 한 분이시면
It's because there is one being of God,
하나
and within God, they're already one. That's why God cannot feel. That is why it's silent sex, because there is no feeling. So Father gives 6 examples. Blinking, picking your nose, your spit, your heart beating. So for example, when you blink, do you know how many times you blink a day? But you're not conscious of blinking. Why? Because your eyelids, your eyelashes, are one with your body. So same thing for all the other 6 examples. Because God, although God is man and woman, because the man and woman within God is already achieved through absolute sex oneness. Because God exists as such a being, within God there is no feeling. That is why if you're one within one being, you cannot feel. So when 2 beings, so God's purpose of creation was for the 2 beings to become one so that you can feel. And that is the division. That's why God created Adam and Eve, divided beings, so that they can come together again. And when they become one, the perfected Adam and perfected Eve, when they become one through absolute sex, through the give and receive action, they can feel. And in order to feel this, God created. So origin God, the God of night, has no feeling. And that is why God divided into Adam and Eve when He created. And during the growth period of Adam and Eve, one mind with God, one body, one idea, one core. So to become one vertically with God before marriage, one mind, one body, one idea, to have one idea, same idea as God, one core, and to meet God through these, and after perfecting themselves, to meet each other through absolute sex. And this is moving sex. So your sexual organ concave and convex, when there is give and receive action, there is moving sex. That's why it's moving. And this is how God settles. And harmony and unification is achieved. So they become one through absolute sex. And then, what is union? Absolute faith, absolute love, absolute obedience. There's one word missing. Absolute subject. So absolute faith, absolute love, absolute obedience, absolute subject. There's pure love sex. So Adam, Eve, God become one. So Adam and Eve become one, and God comes down vertically to join, and 3 of them become one. So blessed families, once they go to the spirit world, so when they do 경배 in front of God and say their greetings, when they go, how do they go? So husband and wife are naked and they make love. So this is how they say their greeting to God when they go to the spirit world after living in this physical world. And then all the birds, all the animals, all the plants will come together and sing. And at a certain point, God will come down on them together and become one. So in one way, it's one person. In another way, it's 2 people. In another way, it's 3 people. And this is union. So if you look before, so one mind, one body, one essence. So that's one essence. This union is one essence. So origin, division, union, action. And in Christian terminology, this is the Trinity. In our terminology, it's one essence. God, Adam and Eve, three of them becoming one. Through what? Through absolute sex.
이것만 되면
So as long as this is accomplished, the children that come as a result are God's direct children, and the four-position foundation can be achieved easily without the fall.
예술적으로 사랑한다는 것은
To love artistically,
아르헨티나에서 이 행사
July 1st, 1996, there was a ceremony in Argentina. So this is the method for making love. So as I mentioned before, as long as you keep within the three principles, after blessing only with your spouse and attending God, these are the three principles. It's applicable to everyone. They all have to keep it. But the method is free. So within the three principles, there is freedom in method. What is the purpose of this? Is to make God happy and also to protect the liberated sexual organ. And in order to protect husband and wife, they have to make love better than the secular world and live for the sake of each other. And that's why within the three principles, there is freedom. This is true. The father says it's a lot. So the method is free. So I already explained all this. Human beings are the chief of all things. So animals, they can only love with premise of multiplying. But for human beings, there's no prerequisite of multiplication. They can love freely whenever. Because the purpose of their love is to become one. And so that God can come down vertically down to be happy together. And this is the special right of the human beings. That's why human beings, they have freedom of making love within the three principles and not limited to reproduction. So husband and wife should make their love into a art. So if the house falls down while they're making love, God would probably give them a better house. So this is the greatest gift given by God. And through this love, husband and wife and God can experience the greatest joy. So again, if husband and wife agree, method is free. I explained before. September 5th, 1997. So for the sake of God and spouse, through this you can know the greatest love and conceive the greatest life, and you can protect the true lineage and true conscience. And the purpose of this includes the protection of blood lineage. The core is that the root of true love is absolute sex. So I'm just going to skip over this. I explained it before. So conclusion. Absolute sex is God's purpose of creation. God's purpose of creation was to feel directly joy through absolute sex. True parents. So the ultimate unity of true parents. 2010. So ultimate unity of true parents was achieved through absolute sex. So ultimate unity of true parents of heaven, earth, and humankind is also through absolute sex. God's inheritance, also through absolute sex. The best ability is also through absolute sex. Without this, we cannot even think about God.
때문에 참 부모님의 생애 도전을
The true parent's life course
하나님으로부터
is to inherit the absolute sex from God
완성해서
and to perfect absolute sex and to bequeath it to us, the blessed families. This was the core mission of true parents. And we can understand Foundation Day with this concept.
그리고 칠사부활
So seven deaths and resurrections
이것도 절대 성의 을 선포하고
also
상속해주는 의미가 가장
has the meaning of proclaiming the absolute sex.
최고의 사랑도 절대
The pride of Unification Church is absolute sex.
자녀들의 최고의
The children's greatest pride is also absolute sex. The perfection of ideal family and ideal kingdom is also through absolute sex.
이해줄 수 있는 내용이
And we can understand it through absolute sex.
공동체지만
So Unification Church, there's a lot of communities, but as a whole, the blessed community,
이것이 뭡니까? 축복과정은 결론은 다른 거 몰라도 이걸 때문은 절대
so we cannot think of a blessed family community without absolute sex.
하는 것을 이게 무슨 말이에요? 아버님이 아까 말씀드렸던
So I mentioned this before. So when True Father was going over to Japan to study, he made two determinations. One, to not fall. Second, to guide Japan ideologically. And Father kept these.
물론 공부하겠지만
We will study this later today. But second,
아담은 어떻게 타겠어요?
how did Adam and Eve fall?
이게 말씀처럼 2권에 나오는
So
청년도 말씀입니다. 아담 해와가 어떻게 타겠어요?
how did they fall? It's from the speech volume 2, page 40 to 41.
소리를 들었습니다.
So Adam and Eve heard from God to not eat the commandment, and after a short while after,
98로부터 선악과를 따먹고
he heard from Archangel that you can eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
하나님의 소리와 천사장의
In order not to fall,
하지 않겠지요.
if the sound of the voice coming from God and Satan were the same, then there would have been no fall, right?
하나님의 소리
But because God's sound and Satan's sound were different,
타락의 문제점은 무시엘로부터 오는구나.
the problem
아담
of the fall came from Satan. The source was Satan, because what he said was different from God.
분별해서
And in that case, Adam and Eve should have been able to distinguish and act according to God's sound. Then there would have not been the fall.
하나님의 소리를 들은
But Adam and Eve,
천사장이 와가지고
after hearing God's sound, were persuaded
이런 말이고
by Satan.
이런 말이고 이런 말이고
Satan explains
거기에 셔놓은
when God says do not eat, he means this, this, this. And because they acted upon Satan's words, they fell.
축복가정들은 교회에 오면은
So when blessed families come to church, they hear God's words. But when they go out to the world, they hear the Satan's words mostly. So it's important to distinguish well. And in order to grow our ability to distinguish, we have to understand the divine principle clearly.
적어도 우리들이
So at least
자녀들
ourselves, our blessed children, should be able to distinguish between the sound of God and sound of Satan.
과 관련해서
Especially relating to the sexual organ, we have to teach them.
라고 말씀을 드리면서
And I'll end here. Let's pray.
은혜로우신 아버지 하나님
Dear Heavenly Father,
이런 시간에
thank you for this precious time where we can study about absolute sex. I'm really grateful this time. True Father went to prison 6 times, and 7th, there was a helicopter incident. And through these, True Father clearly taught us the meaning of absolute sex. We are grateful for this. God and true parents, through absolute sex, became one. Likewise, we hope that we can become one with true parents through absolute sex and walk the way of becoming one with God. Blessed families, not just us, but our children as well. We hope that you can guide them to this way so that God can come to us as individuals and our families and become blessed families where God can reside and keep. And please guide us to keep absolute sex. I pray all this in the name of Taegyong Blessed Family. Achu.